Hello and welcome to another episode of Songs from the Saddle. Thank you for joining me on today's ride. As you can see, I'm riding my Triumph Bonneville T140 today, and I'm in the Scottish borders. I've actually just been to St Mary's Loch, and I'm currently riding over the fells towards Hawick. I'm having a fantastic time. I've done over 200 miles already today, and the Bonneville is just running beautifully. It's 43 years old as this bike, and it's rather short on the type of technology that you find on virtually all modern bikes. It has no fuel injection, no ABS or traction control. There are no rider modes or dynamic suspension, and as you can see, there's no TFT display, just some analog clocks with the rather apt name of Vagliers. So, because I've been having such a great time riding this bike today, I'm reflecting on the technology that we have on new bikes in comparison to this bike, and whether we actually need all of that stuff. And by that I mean, does it really enhance the riding experience, or does it possibly somehow take away from that riding experience? I'm not denying that much of the new technology that we find on bikes is great. It can add to rider safety, and it certainly increases reliability. And some things such as heated handlebar grips can considerably increase comfort. However, I'm finding that I'm getting less and less inclined to ride modern bikes, and I find myself spending more and more time now riding my older bikes. There's a lot to this. I mean, one of them is just maintenance and mechanicking. I'll maybe talk about that some other time, because I really enjoy working on my bikes, and that for me is a very big part of the joy, the pleasure of owning a motorcycle. And of course, modern bikes with all this sophisticated electronics are getting harder and harder to work on. So that's one reason why I'm sort of more inclined towards older bikes. But there is definitely, an aspect of the rider experience as well. One very obvious lack of technology on this Bonneville is that it has no electric starter. I just have a kickstart, and I rather like that. So that's what I want to talk about today. Maybe it's my age. But I would argue that there's something very special about starting a motorbike with a kickstart, and it's something that we've lost with modern motorcycles. Now, I can remember getting my first bike with an electric start, and that was very exciting. In fact, it was a revelation. But at the same time, I remember experiencing a sense of loss. There's something very special about the practice of starting a bike with a Kickstarter. Undeniably, the electric starter is more convenient, and particularly if you've got problems with your knees or your hips, which a lot of older riders are doing now. But I feel that somehow it removes one of the most important aspects of riding. For one thing, the Kickstarter represents a much more physical engagement with the bike, obviously. Riding is essentially a physical and a sensory experience, and this experience starts with the rider firing the engine into life. I find that there's something emasculating about just pushing an electric starter button. It's much more invigorating to start your ride by swinging on the starter pedal, particularly if you're starting a high compression, large capacity machine, a large single in particular. The bike fires into life through your own physical effort and through your skill. And then of course there's the noise and the vibration and the smell as the engine fires into life at your bidding. It's part of a ritual that encapsulates the experience of motorcycling. Secondly, kickstarting requires a much more intimate relationship with your bike. You need to be able to judge the right amount of advance, particularly if you've got a bike with manual advance, which a lot of the old British bikes have. You've got to get the right amount of throttle, and you've got to be able to nudge the engine into the optimal position to start the swing on the kickstart. And there are many fine nuances to this art that only come with practice and experience. You need to know your bike. You need to know, does the bike need a hard kick or a smooth swing? Do you need to free up the clutch with a couple of dummy kicks first? Do you need to tickle the carburetor, or if there's a choke, how much choke do you need to apply? There's so many aspects to the art of starting a bike with a kickstart, particularly an old British bike. And as you learn how to start the bike, you really get to know your bike. You get to know that bike more intimately, and you find that every bike has its own particular quirks. And so it's with hard-earned experience and usually not without a small amount of frustration that you learn how to coax your bike into life. And this is one of the key components of what we call character in a bike. If a bike is particularly finicky to start, or if you need a very specific technique, then we regarded it as having more character. This leads to a special relationship with the bike. You learn your bike's needs, its likes, its dislikes, and in return it rewards you by starting for you. And something particularly nice if you can start your bike but strangers aren't able to start your bike because they don't know all these little nuances. And pressing an electric button is just not the same. There's also an undeniable romance to starting a bike by kicking it over. More so now that all modern bikes have electric starters, it evokes a lost age during which motorcycles held a very different role in our lives. And certainly for me, it evokes memories of useful adventures and carefree times with good friends. The very sound of kicking an engine and it catching and firing into life is so different to the sound of an engine starting off the whir of an electric motor. An engine firing into life after a kickstart is a sound that's just so much more satisfying. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with what I say? Do you disagree? Please, if you have thoughts on the subject, share them in the comments box below. I'd love to hear what you think about this subject. Thank you for riding along with me, and hopefully I'll see you on the next ride.